3:19 in the morning, October 24th, 2025. Prestatyn, North Wales. A neighbor's doorbell camera flickers to life, and what it captures looks completely ordinary at first glance. A woman moving slowly through the dark, leaning on a crutch and walking beside a young man carrying a rucksack on his back. If anyone had been watching that footage in real time, they probably would have thought nothing of it. Maybe she needed some air. Maybe he was helping her. Maybe it was just a quiet moment between a mother and her son. But Angela Shellis was never coming home from that walk. 5 hours later, a member of the public made a discovery that no one should ever have to make. A body face down in the undergrowth of a nature reserve. Catastrophic head injuries, a trail of blood that stretched over 100 meters along the path. A crutch discarded nearby. Gloves soaked through. A balaclava left behind like an afterthought. And somewhere back in town, the man from that footage had already walked through his front door, sat down at his laptop, and opened Discord. Here is the thing, though. What you are about to hear is not a story about a moment that spiraled out of control. There was no argument that went too far, no split second of rage, nothing that could even remotely be explained away as an accident. This was planned, meticulously, over the course of several weeks, with weapons bought in advance, a written manifesto, protective clothing ordered online, and an artificial intelligence chatbot consulted for advice on how to carry it out and cover it up cleanly afterwards. And the person behind every single bit of that planning was her own son. Prestatyn is a small seaside town sitting quietly on the North Wales coast, perched where the green hills of Denbighshire roll down to meet the Irish Sea. A population of just under 19,000 people, a 4-mile promenade, sandy beaches, a Victorian high street, the kind of town that people move to when they want life to slow down a little. Coastal walks, family holidays, a community where most people know their neighbors. It is, by every measure, an ordinary and peaceful place. And that is exactly what makes what happened here so hard to absorb. Because by the time October 2025 arrived, the world that this quiet town sat in had quietly changed in ways that most people, including the families living inside it, hadn't fully come to terms with yet. Teenage boys across Britain were being pulled into online spaces built entirely around hatred. Isolation was being weaponized by algorithms designed to keep young men scrolling deeper and deeper into communities where women were enemies and violence was entertainment. And artificial intelligence had become powerful enough that anyone, including a disturbed teenager living in a semi-detached house on a residential street, could use it as a planning tool. This case sits right at the center of all three of those things, and when it was over, investigators described it as one of the most disturbing murder cases Britain had seen in years. But before we get into what happened, you need to know who Angela Shellis was, and before we do that, a word. This video covers a real crime involving fatal violence against a mother. Some of the details ahead are deeply upsetting. Please watch with care. Angela Shellis was born in 1980 in the rugged, wind-swept hills of Gwynedd in North Wales. She grew up, built a life, moved away, and then eventually found her way back home. And that return said everything about the kind of woman she was. Because Angela didn't come back to Prestatyn for herself. She came back for her boys. For years, she had been living in Bedfordshire, raising her 2 sons alongside her husband, Mark Roberts. But in 2021, after the marriage ended in divorce, Angela made a decision that most people in her position might not have made. Rather than stay where she had built her adult life, she packed everything up and moved back to North Wales. Back to her parents, back to her sister Sarah, back to the familiar coastline she'd grown up around. She wanted her sons to have family close by. She wanted a support system around them during what had already been a difficult few years, and she wanted a fresh start somewhere that felt like home. Once she was back, Angela threw herself into building a new life with the same quiet determination that seemed to define everything she did. She was a fully qualified teacher by training, but she made a deliberate choice to take a lower-paying role as a teaching assistant at Rill High School instead. Not because she had to, but because it meant more time with her sons. That was the trade-off she chose without hesitation. When she joined the school in 2023, staff and students took to her immediately. Her head teacher described her as caring and committed. She was, by all accounts, one of those people who make a place feel warmer just by being in it. And she did not stop there. On top of her job and raising 2 boys largely on her own, Angela was also training to become a reflexologist in whatever spare time she could find. A woman who never sat still, never stopped investing in something, always building, always doing, always showing up. Her Facebook page painted the picture of someone who wore her heart entirely on her sleeve. It was filled with photographs of family days out, ordinary moments around the home, the kind of posts that don't go viral but mean everything to the people who know you. She once shared a post that read, "I will never understand how some parents just get on with life without caring about their children." And she had a photo of a home ornament with the words, "Home is where my boys are." That wasn't a caption for likes. That was just the truth of how she lived. She had 2 sons. Ethan was the eldest, away at university by the time all of this unfolded, thriving, doing well. He called his mother every single day. Every single day. He later described her as his best friend. And then there was Tristan, the youngest, still living at home with Angela on Coniston Drive, diagnosed with both autism and ADHD, recently left school without qualifications, unemployed, and completely dependent on her. Angela knew that Tristan was struggling in ways that went beyond what she could fully manage alone. She had fought for him at every turn, chased support, contacted services, advocated for him the way only a mother would. And when things got so bad that he attacked her in her own kitchen and ended up briefly classed as homeless in shared accommodation nearby, she still took him back in. Because he was her son, because she believed he was vulnerable, because she loved him in that deep, stubborn, unconditional way that does not ask whether it is being returned. That unconditional love would cost Angela Shellis her life. If you're finding this story as difficult and gripping as I did while putting it together, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what comes next. Because now we need to talk about who Tristan Roberts really was, and what he had been quietly becoming for a very long time. Tristan Roberts was 18 years old. He lived at home with his mother on Coniston Drive, unemployed, with no qualifications and no plans to change either of those things. On paper, he was a young man who needed support. And for a long time, that is exactly how Angela saw him. He had been diagnosed with both autism and ADHD. He had spent time in and out of psychiatric care. He had already appeared in court for carrying a knife in public, which meant that by the age of 18, he already had a criminal record. People who knew him from school described him as a loner, someone who was extremely quiet and kept entirely to himself. And while that